Years ago, the Wii got an exclusive game in the horror series Fatal Frame, and it only released in Japan. Now it's officially come to an international audience under the title Fatal Frame: Mask of the Lunar Eclipse. Was it worth the wait? Make sure you have plenty of film in your camera obscura as I review this spooky, ghost-filled adventure. Also known as Fatal Frame 4, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse is the latest release in the franchise, despite technically being made several years before Fatal Frame 5, Maiden of the Black Water. This time around, however, they opted for a pseudo-remaster of the more than 10-year-old game. Character models have been redone in the same style and quality of 5, and the environments have had some work done on them, but it's mostly just being up-resed. Thankfully, the dark and somber atmosphere of the game works well in pulling you away from the dated aspects of the game. But wow, do they really need to dial back that film grain. The series' somber tone and atmosphere returns in full effect. You'll play as several different characters as they explore an abandoned island sanatorium and its associated locations. While our female protagonists are all natives of the island and trying to figure out what happened to them, our male lead is a cop trying to solve the mystery in and of itself. I personally really like this dynamic because it made the flow of information more palatable. Our female leads are more concerned with personal matters, and thus the lore drops written by each member or other people with relation to their situation feel appropriate. Meanwhile, our cop lead is concerned with clues about the staff and the mysterious disappearances on the island. It works well. As expected in Fatal Frame, the story has dark Japanese horror and cultural themes. We don't really get many games like this outside of the Fatal Frame series and a handful of others. It feels novel if you've never played the series before, but it's also par the course for those who have. While I'm not a big horror fan, I do admittedly find Fatal Frame a bit lacking in originality. And when I say that, I mean it in two ways. On the one hand, its deep dive into Japanese culture with a dark twist is neat, and honestly, we don't really see it that much in international media. On the other hand though, this game especially feels like a checklist of tropes from Japanese horror. Things that happened years ago following the boom of movies like The Ring and The Grudge. Long hair, female ghosts, crying blood, creepy, peeking around corners, loud stingers and sounds when something tries to jump scare you, blah blah blah. It is an old game technically, but even as someone who doesn't really like horror, their attempts to scare and be creepy never really felt original. That said, for people who love this stuff, it's going to be right up your alley. They pull some interesting deep cuts for story and lore, and I just wish they would have done the same for the rest of the horror experience. I did, however, enjoy the story overall. Compared to the last one I played, Maiden of the Black Water, this game's story felt a bit more balanced. As much as I like stories that leave aspects open for interpretation, Fatal Frame 5 explained almost nothing important at all. This time around, a lot of the information and the two different perspectives really helped keep things focused and interesting all the way to the end. As the series trope dictates, Fatal Frame is a horror game themed around ghosts. They're the only enemies in the game, and they have a variety of appearances, all related to the story. The fact that they're not just random ghost enemies, but specific ghosts of characters you read about or that are lore important is one of the coolest aspects of the game. While they do sometimes repeat, the major ones are one-offs, being akin to bosses. Ghosts are fought off with a camera obscura, the series staple. When a ghost appears, you can use the camera to take pictures of them. By taking pictures of hostile ghosts, you'll damage them. And after a while, the ghosts will retreat, allowing you to progress once again. They can damage you once they get close enough, so you'll constantly be maneuvering while also trying to line up shots well and not get grabbed. The camera can also be upgraded in a few different ways for things like damage and added effects. After a while, you can turn it into a beastly little device. The different lenses especially are neat and offer secondary effects like pushing enemies back and more. There is another use as well. Outside of fighting ghosts, the camera is used for exploration and some puzzle solving. Taking pictures of marked areas may reveal hidden details or clues, for example. When non-hostile ghosts appear, taking a picture nets points, as well as adding them to the information file. For more eagle-eyed players, there are some hidden things in the environment to discover. These secrets include things like items and the mysterious cursed dolls that litter each chapter. Just like any survival horror game, exploring the environment fully for supplies and clues for the occasional puzzle is key. While most of these are pretty obvious, occasionally you'll have to find some context clues to proceed. Fatal Frame is pretty light on this aspect, so don't expect too many head scratchers though. While the game can be crit pathed all the way to the end, there's a healthy amount of extras in the game to keep you busy looking in all the corners for secrets. I personally really like the game's setting, so I had a lot of fun just taking my time and wandering through the game's halls and more. And then there are the controls. This game was originally a Wii exclusive after all, so the conversion had some work to do. Thankfully the game plays pretty well enough, but there's definitely room for improvement. The main offender here is the right stick. It controls the camera and the flashlight. This was a basic movement function in the Wii version, and here it has a more standardized control scheme. It's definitely not exactly where it needs to be, and it's a bit awkward but not frustrating. The flashlight highlights hidden items when you're nearby, and the game is pretty generous with revealing stuff, but I definitely had some consistent, awkward camera moments while playing. Also, I should warn you, this is a pretty slow-paced game in terms of moving around. The character's run is more like an extremely light jaunt, if I can use that word. It might turn some people off, but the cramped environments work well for this sort of speed in my opinion. But I'm sure one of the big questions you have is it scary? Well, that's an extremely subjective thing. It's definitely unnerving at first, but I personally got over it pretty quickly as I settled into the gameplay loop. Ghosts can sometimes take you by surprise, but I think the scary factor drops off in place of a kind of creepy or ooh, spooky. On the performance front, I reviewed this on the Switch and it's both good and bad as expected. The added options for things like gyro aiming are a nice addition, and the downside is that it's not nearly as optimized for the Switch. In certain larger rooms, the frame rate takes a surprising hit, but granted, the game's slow pace doesn't really make this too big of a distraction. Lastly, I do want to mention that sometimes there is a bit of a weird translation issue in the game. By and large, it's perfectly fine, but I did come across it in a few random spots. For example, I picked up the stun lens only to look in my inventory and see it called the push lens. It's a small thing I noticed in a few spots, but by and large it didn't really affect the gameplay at all, other than it just being weird. Fatal Frame Mask of the Lunar Eclipse is a good time overall and a decent conversion of the missing Fatal Frame game. Some technical wonkiness aside, it's an enjoyable adventure for those who want more of the series that has sad girls taking pictures of spooky ghosts. The bevy of extras to do or collect keeps the multiple playthroughs interesting, but the slow burn of gameplay and somber atmosphere might not be for everyone. For fans though, this is an easy recommendation. For others, it might be worth considering what kind of game you want to play before you dive in. But that's gonna be it for this spooky review. What do you think? Is Fatal Frame your type of series, or is it something you're gonna skip? Be sure to leave a like, a comment, sub, hit the bell for more reviews like this and more. And also, these will be uploaded to TikTok as well as YouTube, and you can find the written link down below as well. Hope you have a good day out there and stay safe. See you next time.